Hi there. Welcome to Relitigated, the show where five friends who are absolutely not lawyers attempt to retry a real Supreme Court case. I'm your host, Jarrett, and this is episode 9, United States v. Causby. Two quick notes before we get started. First, as always, we try our best to represent the facts and decisions in the case as accurately as possible, but we're not lawyers, and nothing in this episode should be taken as legal advice. Second, if you enjoy the podcast, please support us by subscribing, rating, leaving us a comment, and telling your friends. We could really use the help in getting the word out. If you like, you can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Our handle is @RelitigatedPodcast. Thank you so much for your support. Okay, with that out of the way, let's start the show.
Yeah, I love how he pushed record like right in the middle.
Just hurtling like a meteor straight into live.
All right. Hi there. Welcome to the Relitigated Podcast. I'm your host, Jarrett. I'm joined by my co-host, Nikki. Say hi, Nikki.
Hi.
We also have with us three friends who will be role-playing as our justices. First, we have Associate Justice Adam. What's up, Adam?
It's not role playing, it's real to me.
Excellent. Next, we have Associate Justice Mike. Say hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
And lastly, we have our Chief Justice, Sarah.
Good evening.
If you're new to the show, here's how this works. Nikki and I have selected a real Supreme Court case, and our justices do not know what case we have selected. Nikki will introduce the case to us and walk us through the facts so that we can all get familiar with the details. The justices are free to ask factual questions during this time, and we will answer those questions as best as we can. Next, we're going to move into oral arguments where I will roleplay as the petitioner and Nikki will roleplay as the respondent. We each get 7 minutes to make our case, during which the justices can interrupt us and ask probing questions. When the arguments are over, the justices will deliberate and deliver their own opinions. The final rulings do not need to be unanimous. Majority opinion will win. If two or more justices agree in principle, they can still disagree as to why. Once we've had our fun with our mock hearing, Nikki and I will reveal what the Supreme Court actually decided and talk about how we feel about the actual results and why the case matters. Sound good to everybody?
Yep.
Giddy up.
Yeehaw.
Bird.
All right, let's do this. Nikki, the floor is yours.
Okay. So our case begins with 2.8 acres, and this is a property around Greensboro, North Carolina. This property is used as a chicken farm with about 400 chickens owned by TC and his wife. The farm was their business, and it supported the family. Located just about a fourth of a mile away from the farm was a local airfield. So to give you an idea of how close this property was to the airfield, one of the runways that pointed right at the property was 2,220 feet from TC's barn and about 2,275 feet from his house, which is roughly an 8 to 10 minute walk. If you like the distances expressed in units of football fields, we're looking at 7.5 football fields, if that means anything to anyone. Given the proximity of the airport, TC had small private planes flying over his property, but since the airfield didn't get much use, these are smaller planes, it was never a cause for concern. However, 8 years after TC and his wife purchased the property, the airfield was taken over by the Municipal Airport Authority to be operated as a municipal airport, and then was contracted with the federal government for use in part as a military airfield. So now, instead of small private planes occasionally taking off and landing at the airfield, now full-sized military aircraft were regularly taking off and landing. Now, as a plane approaches a runway for landing, it follows something called the path of glide or glide path. And this is a specific heading and height that a plane should have as it comes in to land. The approved glide path for the runway facing TC's property had planes coming in as low as 83 feet above the ground. So this puts planes just 67 feet above the house, 63 feet above the barn, and 18 feet above the tallest tree on the property.
Yeah, nope. Nope.
With the increased frequency of large, loud military aircraft coming into land at such low heights above the property, TC's farm and livelihood were immediately impacted. So the sounds of the planes overhead were so loud that the chickens would fly into the walls in fright, and 150 chickens eventually died this way. In just one day, 6 to 10 chickens were killed fleeing the sounds of the airplanes. The stress on the chickens also impacted their egg laying, and production decreased sharply. As a result, TC and his family had to give up the chicken business and sell off all of the remaining chickens at a loss because they couldn't continue housing them safely on the property.
The chickens got some unfortunate ideas about learning how to fly.
Indeed. And not only were the chickens impacted, stress impacted the family as well. Sleep was hard to come by, and they became, quote, nervous and frightened. Landing lights on the planes lit up the night, further causing issues with sleep. There were several accidents related to the airfield in the immediate area, and they feared that a plane could crash into their house while landing at any time. So, with his business destroyed and his family's welfare at risk, TC sued the federal government on the grounds that his land had been taken in violation of his Fifth Amendment rights. The specific part of the amendment that is cited for this case reads, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." The lower federal court ruled that the property had lost value and that the US government had taken an easement over the property. So this means that the government didn't own the land in question, but had taken on a right to enter or use the land. So easements come up a lot in home ownership. So an example would be if the road to your house passed over another person's property, you would get an easement from your neighbor to allow you to use that road to access your property, but you wouldn't own any part of your neighbor's property in any way. The court calculated how much value had been lost from the property and awarded it to TC. It turned out to be less than what TC was asking for, but it wasn't nothing. Unimpressed with the outcome, the federal government appealed the lower court ruling to the Supreme Court, and so now it's before you guys to decide. So the question for our justices today is, was TC's land taken by the federal government as understood under and in violation of the Fifth Amendment?
Yes. Wait.
All right, cool.
Yep, probably.
All right, we're done.
Let's wrap it up.
Back it in.
What an efficient episode.
Good job, team.
70 feet over the house? Is that what I heard?
So let me go back and just make sure. It would have been 67 feet above the house.
Ah, man, I would have set up a big, like, Acme cartoon net on my roof. First time a Spitfire or whatever gets caught in that net, military is going to think twice about landing planes on my property. 60 feet, that's kind of egregious, right?
And like, rest in peace to all the chickens, you know?
I can't wait to hear how much the court ruled in favor he should get his compensation, that the U.S. government was like, no, we're taking this to the Supreme Court. We're not just paying that.
Honestly, I would imagine any sum. Their pettiness knows no bounds. Like, you're going to just say no to us? You're going to say no to us over a bunch of chickens? Nah, we're going to crush you. I mean, this is the military we're talking about.
Yeah, they don't have mercy. They don't care about TC and his foul.
TC and his foul. When you put it that way, I'm not sympathetic to him anymore either.
That's my new Southern rock band, TC and the Foul.
TC and his foul.
Are we in the mood to hear some arguments?
We're
Fine.
arguing amongst ourselves, I believe.
Yeah. Hold on. We're arguing.
There's time for that yet. You'll get there.
Okay. All right. We're just very, very excited about the chickens. Empathetic, maybe a little bit. Okay, go on.
I'm just depressed about it.
I'm just
All right. Jarrett, get it over with. whatever your argument may
Take
be.
that chicken out back and shoot it. Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Nikki, I am going to need 7 minutes on the clock.
All right, let me get my timer all situated.
Things you think we would do before the episode started, but never do.
No, that's not fun at all.
Oh, let
Okay.
Nikki live her life.
Yes, exactly. Let me be free.
Nah, you guys got to invest. For Christmas, I'm getting you guys a big 7-minute hourglass.
All right. This will start whenever you do.
All right, here we go. Ms. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, TC is accusing the government of taking something from him, but the argument relies on an ancient reading of common law and flies in the face of current federal law. Allow me
Wait.
to explain.
Can I stop you immediately? Ancient? Are you referring to the Constitution as ancient?
Oh, no, this actually goes back to like British common law before the founding of the country. Yeah.
I was like, okay, that's wrong immediately. All right, continue.
Yes. There is a very, very, very old precedent in common law that comes from before this nation was founded that says if you own property, you own all the sky and the universe above it as well, extending out into space. If the government's use of the air above the property can be considered a taking of property under the Fifth Amendment, then you have to accept that TC and every landowner owns the sky above their property. Unfortunately, this is an idea that just doesn't work with the modern world. If this is true, then every plane in the air right now is trespassing on the land of whomever is below them. Every pilot would have to negotiate access rights with the property owners that they fly over. This is a view of the world that basically kills all air travel for industry and the military, and I suggest that you rule against it. So if we put aside this very, very, very old idea that you own the sky above your land out into space because it's so old that it never accounted for the idea of human flight, then we must conclude that nothing that TC owns was actually taken from them because they don't own the sky. Because of this, the Fifth Amendment doesn't apply. Remember that the Fifth Amendment says no person shall have private property taken for public use without just compensation. In this case, no private property was taken. A plane just flew in the air, which, again, nobody can own. To make the matter even clearer, the Air Commerce Act was passed by Congress and determined that the sky above your property is not yours to possess. Instead, Congress gave an executive agency the authority to determine at which heights planes safely travel, and at those heights, the sky becomes everyone's property. The glide path is the heading and the height a plane is expected to take when it comes in for a landing, and as determined by the executive agency that has authority. So, here again, we see that property that TC believes he owns and was taken is not owned by him and thus was not taken from him. As for the value of the land, what you can do with the land is an important part of the value of the land. TC argues that the land cannot be used as a chicken farm any longer, and even if that were true, it wouldn't stop TC from using the land for literally any of its other approved purposes. Businesses rise and fall because of the conditions around them all the time. It's the entrepreneurial spirit that pushes folks to reinvent and to find new ways to put their assets, like their land, to work. Perhaps TC needs to get out of this single stream mindset and do one of the myriad other things that this land could be used for to turn a profit. Animals take time to get used to things. We see this with every technological advancement. So who's to say chickens wouldn't get used to the plains anyway? But either way, this is 2.8 acres of land that could be used for anything. And with a little ingenuity and reimagining, might even be sold for a profit. Maybe even back to us, the federal government. I mean, it is literally right next door to what is becoming a booming airfield. There are tons of implications for possible uses of this property that could be quite lucrative.
You should open a KFC.
Yeah, that'll do it. But no, TC is asking you to say that he owns the sky and that the land's only value was as a chicken farm. Neither of these things are true, and the only logical conclusion is that the government has not taken any property, and so the Fifth Amendment does not apply. Thank you, and I yield to questions.
Question.
Sure.
So, are you saying that these landing airplanes were like coming in? What'd you call it? The glide field? Is that what it is?
Glide path,
Glide path.
Glide path?
as
Okay, so
defined
is the
by the executive agency that has the authority to define it.
Okay, so like, is this glide path legitimately like it came in 18 feet above the tallest tree on the property? I don't know how tall the trees are out there, but like, are you saying, Jared, don't you think that's a little unreasonable? Like a giant military plane coming in 18 feet above the tallest tree on the property. Doesn't that seem a little.
It was either that or clear through the barn like a 1920s silent film. So that was the least.
Plenty
Yeah.
of planes are coming in lower over people's houses right now. Have you ever heard of Midway in Chicago?
True,
It's
it's true.
surrounded by houses.
They may or may not be full of chickens.
I mean, I'm just a humble not lawyer. So I
Yeah.
do not profess to understand, the logistics and the safety implications, but I will tell you that I trust the members of the air authority who have done the math and developed this glide path.
I'm fascinated by this whole owning the sky concept. When was that doctrine dispelled within the United States?
There's no evidence to suggest that it was ever really a doctrine that was implemented in the United States.
Okay, so
and
a fanciful
Congress,
thing that everyone just accepted as true, I guess.
I would like to own
well,
the sky.
it never came up because there was no flight, so it didn't matter. And since flight has existed, Congress has passed a law that says you don't own the sky.
Just the idea that I can
So-
buy a vacant lot and at any given random point in time I own part of a galaxy, millions of light years above my head is very entertaining to me.
Wait, so is there a standard height at which this rule applies? Is it the same everywhere? Does if I go outside of my backyard, how much feet up do I own?
And in most places, I believe it's a couple of 100 feet, but
Well,
the
unless you're
glide
TC, fuck
path,
that guy.
the glide path is defined, for the landing strip there. So
So as you get closer to an airport, really the amount of area you own decreases.
that's correct. He never owned that space.
And we are at time.
Thank you, Jarrett.
Thank you.
Sounds like you really hate TC and his chickens.
It's mostly the chickens that he has a vendetta against. Don't ask me how I know that, but I'm just positive it's true.
I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'm hired to do a job. It has no bearing on my actual opinion.
That job is ruthlessly discriminate against chickens. Gotcha.
Well,
If you're all done with me, I will turn you over to Nikki and put her 7 minutes up on the board.
I do have more questions, but I don't think they're actually pertinent to anything anyone cares about, so continue.
well, I mean, as Chief Justice, like I'll allow you to ask one.
How far down below the ground do you own?
You're so right. That's not pertinent.
Not prepared to own that. I think mineral rights and such is a whole other separate area of law, but I'm not so sure that you actually own a lot of that either.
I bet once
do
you
you
get
do?
to like groundwater, like things get really hairy.
Man, our freedom is ephemeral at best.
Nikki, you are you got 7 minutes on the board. You can go whenever you like.
All right.
Take your time, no rush. Whatever you like. Take a second, stretch out, get a glass of water.
So, thank you very much, justices.
You're welcome.
Here, We have a conflict between the advances of technology and the historical grounding of the law.
Yeah, we do.
However, scientific and technological advancement is not an excuse to throw out the fundamental principles, rights, and understandings that have guided us thus far and will continue to guide us into the future.
Preach. Okay, I'm done. Sorry.
This is, at heart, a matter of property easement. I will grant you, those who originally drafted and ratified the Constitution in the late 1700s did not account for flight. However, they did preserve rights and freedom from government intrusion. So, English and American common law, dating back to the 17th century, established that a property owner's rights and ownership over a plot of land are not limited to the surface of the soil. According to the old maxim, a property owner's rights extend below the surface, down to hell, and above the ground, up to heaven.
Well, sorry. There you go, Adam. That answers your question.
At any given moment, I have a rotating slice of heaven cutting through sky.
Yeah, I've got some follow-up questions. How far down is hell and how far up is heaven?
Well, I would say that, this is an old maxim. This is common law, basically, so it's been previously recognized. So there's been
like, who's going to stop me if I say I own the sky?
This really hasn't been formally established, really, until right now.
Oh, psych! It's the U.S. military. They say that you don't own the sky.
So I'm not saying that the owners literally own all of the air above the property extending into space, but I am saying that in the law, there is longtime recognition that property ownership is more than the surface touching your feet. So keep in mind that the ownership of the air above allows for the construction of buildings, walls, and fencing. Purchasing and use of property also involves such matters as natural light and views. Property ownership also involves allowances and restrictions for overhanging and gunfire. Property owners are affected by all of this and have the right to control their property in this dimension. Congress has indeed set a minimum safe altitude for flight, specifically recognizing a public interest in flight paths and public regulation. That's fine. Planes can use the space that is hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of feet above a house. I can't argue that homeowners are actively using that space. However, in this case, the government moved in next door. So, in accessing the town property, the government has taken to using the landowner's space below the minimum safe altitude defined by Congress. The government argues that they have not set foot upon the land. However, due to the advent of technology, they have engaged in a new form of intrusion by wind, noise, and risk to safety. So, there has been, the government has described this as inconvenient or perhaps uncomfortable. I will inform the court that a jet engine is loud. Estimates from Purdue University and LaSalle University place the noise of a jet engine at distances further away from the glide path here as at or above the threshold of hearing damage and pain, with Purdue University additionally noting the possibility of eardrum rupture at the distance of 82 feet.
That is horrifying. Okay.
I know. TC and his wife bought the land so they may operate a small farm. Now they cannot, and they have lost their means of supporting themselves. They also bought the property so they have a place to live. The noise, physical disturbance, health impacts, loss of sleep, fear, and nervousness caused by the government use of their property has markedly decreased, if not wholly eliminated, the habitability of their home. Even without old school intrusion, this family has lost their home to the military as effectively as if the government had physically quartered its troops within their boundaries. They have received no compensation. So I will say that although that this is a new problem, common law and consideration of the fundamental rights involved reveal that this problem is wearing old clothes. The government, through its use of the airport and its glide path, has taken up an easement on the property and destroyed the owner's abilities to make use of it. This is a taking as far as the Fifth Amendment is concerned, and the Fifth Amendment requires the government to provide just compensation for the taking. Thank you very much, and I will take questions.
So this isn't really, I don't know if this is a question, maybe more of like a hypothetical to go along with your argument. But I mean, what do you think, Nikki? If TC and his family wanted to build a vertical chicken coop that was maybe 100 feet tall, like 8 stories tall.
I got a better example of something legal, a shortwave radio antenna.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like,
That too.
the local ordinance might have something to say about an 8-story chicken coop.
That's
least of which might be the neighbors, but like a radio
Okay,
antenna,
that's
like a
true,
shortwave radio antenna, that's legit. Like that would be in the flight path.
Yeah. Actually, that's a much better example. But I guess that's kind of like the point that I'm trying to get across, right? Like he should have the liberty to do whatever he wants on his property. And if it's to establish like a giant radio antenna or a giant art sculpture that's 8 stories tall or a giant chicken coop that's 8 stories tall.
I like art sculpture because then it gets into First Amendment territory.
Yeah. I feel like he should be able to. Again, maybe that wasn't a question, but Nikki, your argument was very thought-provoking. So that's where my head is at right now.
Thank you. I do agree that, sort of the immediate space above the ground is incorporated within the definition of property. And so while maybe, once again, tens of thousands of feet in the air, that might not be within their jurisdiction as per Congress's law, their immediate environs, that is part of their property.
And that's time.
Thank you, Nikki. Wonderful job, as always.
Why, thank you.
You can't be so blatant with your bias.
Our impartial judges, folks.
Hey, I had to side with Jared on a couple of these at some point.
Yeah, eventually we'll get around to agreeing with him. He is the heel of this production, after all.
I doubt it, but all right.
It's all fun and games. And law.
And law. So this is a tough one, right? Because on the one hand, I'm very sympathetic to this argument that, like, man, you got a chicken coop. You could just move like a quarter mile that way and you'll be set. And, it almost feels like a stubborn matter of pride at this point. On the other hand, I can understand standing up to the government as a stubborn matter of pride, especially if I'm like a, chicken farmer in the middle of nowhere. On
the one hand, go on.
I was going to say, and just, if it were, let's say he was a corn farmer, and he wants to put up a silo, right? And it's in the flight path. Like, I feel like,
that's a good example of a tall thing.
Another tall thing. I've just been sitting here ruminating on the tall things you might plausibly build in your yard.
What if he likes really big hats?
Yeah, a really big hat. An excessively tall treehouse.
Like a ropes course.
Like a
zip line.
One of those things that they use to train firefighters.
A ladder?
Sure. Anyway, my point is, it's much more difficult, I feel like, because the harm that's being done to him vis-a-vis his chickens is a little bit more abstract than like plane colliding with a structure that he's built for his business. It's like the plane has collided with the abstract structure of his chicken's psyche and left them chicken dust.
I can see kind of where the government's head is here. I can see where, although this is probably nothing for them, they don't want to set a precedent where every time they do something, all the landowners will be like, give me lots of money for a ridiculous reason.
Or they're going to have a lot to answer for when they get to nuclear testing, whether that's before or after this case.
It seems petty, but I'm thinking that might be why the government is fighting this as hard as they are.
Yeah, because, again, I wonder how much money the lower court asked the government to compensate TC for. Also, who knows what year this is? Well, actually, wait. When were airplanes invented?
Oh, God.
Was that like the 40s? No, 20s? Was that like the 20s or the 10s or something?
Getting warmer.
Was that before that? Guys, I don't study aviation.
Not important. Not important. What's
Okay.
important is
1903, by the way.
Oh, okay. Tens, I was not far off.
No, but in the 40s, you sure were.
No, I
Yeah.
said the 40s came out of my mouth, and then I was like, no, we were definitely like people were in airplanes like bombing each other at that time. So for sure not then. Anyways. I guess I can also see where the federal government is coming from, because that's a great point, right? Like if they nuclear testing, right? If they're doing bomb tests somewhere and it's close to a suburban neighborhood, which it shouldn't be, let's just put that out there.
I don't
Then
think they were
obviously-
doing nuclear testing near a suburban neighborhood, but
If-
I
but
see.
if-
Let's take this to its logical conclusion. Let's go.
Right? They obviously don't want every person on the street to sue them for all that they're worth. But I feel like in this case, the Fifth Amendment absolutely does apply, because this seems like a very large deprivement of liberty, at least for TC and his family, if this was their livelihood. Not to mention, RIP the chickens. Very unfortunate. So, yeah, I don't really know which way I'm leaning yet. But
important question. What was the compensation they offered him? Was it actually fair?
Well, they didn't offer him any. The courts came up with it.
yeah,
Right.
they didn't want to offer him anything. I'm
Well,
pretty sure.
okay.
We're currently withholding the amount just because, like, if you don't know the year, the amount doesn't really help you.
I guess maybe this is hard to answer, but was it fair? Right? Was it market value or above? I guess that's hard to
Yeah,
answer.
Not being privy of the real estate market in Greensboro, North Carolina at the time.
Oh, come on! You didn't do your homework for this episode?
Yeah. Well, I guess did they do an assessment of the business lost and the equipment and all of that?
Yeah, I guess it's hard to. I'm trying to figure out if this was an honest, good faith effort by the government to make this right because they need this land for legitimate business purposes, legitimate military business purposes.
Well, the government did nothing to try to make this right. It was all the lower courts that said, "Hey, you have to make this right." The government has been fighting this tooth
an
and
aspect
The
of
government
nail.
is
the government.
actively against making this right.
Yeah.
I see that as the government having a dialectic within itself to determine it's the angel and the devil on the collective government shoulders deciding to weigh the scales and make this right. Yeah, that part of the government's all like, nah, screw the chicken guy. But the other part of the government that runs the courts is all like, no, you can't just screw the chicken guy arbitrarily. That's like, I think, the Fifth Amendment, who says you can't do that. You got to pay this man and or stop flying planes over his house and scaring his chickens. The law is
No, I
complicated.
actually agree with you. I feel like there really should be some sort of compensation to TC, absolutely, for the fact that he lost his business as a direct result of his chickens dying of fear. If it was just him living there without his business there, maybe it would be different. But he has a loss of income and is taking a loss by selling all of his equipment and the remaining chickens. And if the government never moved in next door, that probably wouldn't have happened, right? Because they didn't have these issues with the private planes coming in and out, I don't think.
I bet the fuel budget for that base for 1 month could pay for that man to relocate his farm 2 miles down the road and have a much nicer, better farm.
Same zip code and everything,
I feel like the outcome here is we come up with some standardized system of determining compensation for landowners affected by creation of an easement.
Did we just
For
invent
private
eminent
property.
domain?
Should we also rewrite the aviation laws?
And the death penalty. Let's keep going.
Yeah, no more flying. It's an affront to God.
And everybody does own a piece of the sky.
Yeah, and everyone owns the heavens now.
Okay. I feel like I am leaning towards TC on this one, not because Nikki argued for his defense, but because it just seems very, I don't know, this feels way more cut and dry the more that I'm looking at it. This
It
seems like a
does.
definite, he's deprived of his life and his liberty and his property, but he can't use it. He can't even sleep. They're having psychological torture every night with these airplanes flying overhead. I can't even imagine.
I was gonna say if this was strictly business related, I might feel a little bit different. But the fact that there's like legitimate like health consequences going on,
Oh yeah,
I
ruptured
mean,
eardrums.
and his dream of opening a meditation retreat quashed.
Yep. Gone forever.
Yeah, that
You know,
that's a loss of liberty.
it's like goat yoga, but with chickens.
Mm-hmm. The chickens are too stressed to perform yoga.
That would be gross.
it's just chaos.
Well, we know where the next bird flu will come from.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right, team. Let's gather around here. Okay. Which way are the associate justices leaning? I feel like I have a hunch, but who would I be to speak for others? You know.
I'm leaning in TC's direction. I think he deserves some compensation.
Fair enough. Adam, what say you?
I'm struggling because I agree that TC is a victim here and needs compensation, but I'm not 100% sold on the Fifth Amendment argument. So
Interesting.
I'm gonna dissent simply because I can without consequence, and I'm a coward.
So, can you explain why you don't think it fits the Fifth Amendment?
I don't feel
Sway me.
I don't feel like he was deprived of liberty. He was definitely not deprived of his life. Chickens, yes, but chickens are not citizens. They're not protected by the Constitution, sadly.
Wow.
Someday
Not
this
yet.
will change. Not yet, but we live in primitive times. Liberty, that's maybe the best argument here. Like his liberty to be a chicken farmer, I presume, would be at stake. Property, also maybe an argument there, but I'm going to quote the brand new "I'm not touching you" doctrine, which is to say, they're not directly touching him, right? So I think of this as like, imagine they built an interstate highway a quarter mile off of his property. I think everyone would kind of agree that's totally fine, right? They're flying planes. I guess not quite a quarter mile. It's a little bit closer than that, but could all this be solved by them
Less
just
than
taking
100
off higher?
Less than 100 feet.
Sure. Could this all be solved with a steeper angle of ascent and descent into the airport? Maybe we can just
Can we
compromise
just move
here.
the runway? Just different direction?
Flip it around, right? Take off from the other direction.
Yeah.
Land from the other direction. But yeah, I am struggling with this notion that they're actually actively violating his Fifth Amendment. Being very annoying, yes. Potentially having a case for damages that they're affecting his business, yes, but not depriving him of life and liberty. I don't know.
Okay, so I guess this is maybe a stupidly basic question. What are we defining as liberty?
Here we go.
Oh boy.
Yeah, put your powdered wings to work, boys.
Yeah, a basic question. Absolutely basic question. What's liberty?
Yeah. yes, probably we need to define that, huh?
And we'll pick up in part 2.
Join us next week for the definition of liberty.
All right, let's hit Google.
As determined by this court. That's a good question, though. I don't know. I've said this, I think, in a previous episode at one point, but it's all about what would a reasonable person do, or what would a reasonable person think in these situations when you're a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. That's what I took business law. Okay, so I know a little bit maybe about one thing. And I feel like it's within reason to think that if a military airplane is flying close enough to your house where it could potentially rupture your eardrums every night and it's ruining your business, that is a deprivation of liberty. Like,
I looked up the definition of liberty from Cornell. Liberty means freedom from arbitrary and unreasonable restraint upon an individual. Freedom from restraint refers to more than just physical restraint, but also the freedom to act according to one's own will.
Well, there's nothing restraining TC from picking up and moving his chicken farm 2 miles down the road.
No, I guess not.
What money?
Frick.
I guess just to close up my argument about the Fifth Amendment, it explicitly also says without due process of law. And I think it's pretty clear that the aviation authority has jurisdiction to say this is our airspace now. That's due process of law. Whether it's fair or not is a completely different story and irrelevant. But I think due process was followed here. And just to cap it off, assuming that the government could be coerced into compensating him at fair market value for his chicken market so that he could move it 2 miles down the road or what have you, I think that all's fair at that point. Pain in the ass, yeah. Maybe a little bit obnoxious and, not something anyone would want to have happen to their business, 100%.
Certainly.
But,
Certainly.
An amendment violation, a constitutional violation, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
My big sticking point is if we do rule in TC's favor, it does open the floodgates for almost like ambulance chasing lawyers to get to every property owner near any government-owned piece of property.
Right? Anytime a satellite goes over your property, you have the right to shoot at it now.
Or just to be like...
Target practice!
Can you hear planes from a base? Call 666-666 and we'll sue the government for you.
I'm gonna get that International Space Station the next time I see it come around. Next time it goes over my property.
I feel like this could be fixed if the government I don't know, I feel like it could be fixed if they just pay him though.
Yeah, I feel like you could put in place like a standardized method of compensation.
Make him a honorary general, or what's the high rank for Air Force? Make him a captain in the Air Force, and he gets to tend the chickens on the base. Man, this is getting whimsical. Everyone wins.
Including the chickens.
Especially the chickens.
Teach the chickens how to fly planes.
They all get little aviator caps.
How great would that be?
Enlist the chickens.
Draft the chickens. Yeah, maybe this is turning into me potentially dissenting. Because I still feel like a giant military airplane coming within 18 feet of the tallest tree on your property is just way too close.
Yeah, my two sides on this are, on the one hand, I see you don't want to open the floodgates for everyone to just sue the government every time for everything. On the other hand, if this was just about his business, like that would be bad, but there's like legitimate health concerns with the jets flying that low over your property.
Well, and the other thing too is that TC and his family, they lived there before the military.
The military cares about that.
Yeah, well, no, but I don't know. I feel like they've lived there. What did it say? He lived there for 8 years before the military moved in, and they had like no issues with the small like private planes that came in every now and again.
I think we need to downsize the military is what you're saying.
Yeah, defund the Air Force. Well, maybe not. For the sake of TC and his chickens at this time period that this case took place.
Just that one base, you're all grounded.
Yeah.
Paper airplanes only.
Just gliders, yep.
Okay, hypothetical question. Why can't the government move their airbase like 2 miles the other direction? Why does TC have to move their chicken farm?
Well, because 2 miles the other direction is where GC's chicken farm is, the competing chicken farm in the county.
And he's way more litigious.
Okay, so there's insider trading going on with the Air Force and the chicken farms.
It's exactly like the plot of Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Is that the plot of Fantastic Mr. Fox?
Basically, yeah. It's all about aerial easements for the military, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And chickens flying planes,
and chickens learning how to fly, yeah. Yeah, classic.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I feel like this is one that I could go in circles on.
This hinges on you now.
Like a frightened chicken with its head cut off.
I've taken a provocative hot take, thereby forcing you into making a stand.
Oh my god, am I going to be the swing vote? No,
you are the swing vote.
I am the swing vote. Okay. Well, for the sake of being different, I think I'm just going to stick with my gut feeling in that the government did deprive him of liberty and property by utilizing the airspace just feet away from his house. And I think at the end of the day, the TC should be paid for the loss of business, and also the psychological and potentially physical damages that he and his family took on by dealing with these jet engines coming,
Perhaps some
landing on
hearing
their
aids
house
are
every
coming his
night.
way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe we can be a bit more clear on this. Maybe we can
No.
come up with there is like a test as like to some level of harm that requires compensation, and then like some standardized system of compensation if the assessment proves that enough harm is met
Oh,
to annoy future litigation, to be like, okay, we have a system in place for this.
Wait, okay. Also, we should establish, because this wasn't made very clear to me, but we should establish like a very clear threshold for how many feet above ground do you have jurisdiction on in your own property. Like, I feel like 100 feet isn't the craziest thing to ask for. I mean, I don't know. Like, then we can determine, like, okay, if your house is within the flight path of an airplane, if the airplane comes within 80 feet of your house or 100 feet of your house, like, that's not cool, you know? Hold the airplanes accountable.
Yeah. Well, I think the Civil the Air Commerce Act kind of
Yeah, but it's not.
that.
Yeah, but I don't know what it is. That
I think
it didn't
it's different.
say.
It's
It just depends.
the airspace above the minimum safe altitudes of flight.
Okay, but like, what are those altitudes?
Well, it's like that's the thing, is as you get closer to a runway like that,
Well, yeah.
that distance in the altitude gets lower and lower because planes do have to come down.
Right. It's one thing if you like
yes.
choose to live in that little triangle of air exclusion, but it's a different story when they build the base next to your house, I suppose.
Yeah.
Am I changing my mind?
Yeah, to bring this into the modern day, what does this mean for drones that I can buy from Walmart with cameras?
I can't even get into that now. Next episode.
Yeah, we'll get into drone doctrine.
We are not sophisticated enough to be talking about drone law.
The current Supreme Court doesn't even know what a drone is.
No.
How are we feeling? We got formal opinions we want to issue?
I think so.
Yeah-ish. Yeah. I don't feel great, but I do have an opinion. So
Well, who feels
sticking with
strongly? Who wants to go first?
Okay.
Nobody.
No,
Okay,
you know
well,
what?
keep deliberating.
No. Screw you guys. I got this. I'm going first. I'm going with my gut. I do think that, defined by the Fifth Amendment, TC's land was taken by the federal government. I also would like to add, once again, that I think that there is a clear deprivation of liberty here. And I think, for what it's worth, TC should be compensated for the loss of the business and any damages that they've taken. And then maybe they can use that compensation to move somewhere else and open their chicken farm and operate with as much liberty and with as many chickens as they would so please.
Yeah, and I'm going to go ahead and issue my opinion that I do not think that his Fifth Amendment rights were violated. That said, what's right and what's fair, a completely different story. He probably deserves to have decent above market compensation given the stress and physical harm that was caused to him and his property. Unfortunately, they're not citizens, but the chickens one day will have the right to vote.
Soon.
Yeah, I'm still on the fence on this, on if this is a Fifth Amendment violation or not.
I don't think it is. And that's why I'm ruling in favor of the government.
Do you hear yourself, Adam?
Yeah, I just felt like being contrary today, I think. Just on the wrong side of the bed.
No justice for chickens.
I'm just getting ready for a future in which I find myself nodding and agreeing with the government, no matter what's actually happening.
Fair. Well, Michael, you do have to decide something. Unfortunately. That is how the law works.
Yeah, somehow this pivoted around and you're the central point now.
Yeah. So I don't know how that happened.
I don't even have a wig. This is a lot to put on someone that doesn't even have a wig. My decision is that I made a grilled cheese sandwich earlier, and it was pretty good.
TC and his chickens died for your right and freedom to make a grilled cheese sandwich.
I dissent from that opinion.
Yeah, imagine like a fire
Objection.
jet like hovering over your head while you're making that grilled cheese sandwich.
like a harrier toasting your bread with its
Yeah.
VTOL jets.
Yeah, how would you feel? How would you feel making that grilled cheese sandwich with a jet engine flying just 80 feet above your house?
I feel like we've gotten off track here.
What are we doing again?
All right, order in my court. I am swinging the gavel. Which, by the way, Jared, I should get one of those, and I should be allowed to like bang it on my desk. And you should not be allowed to edit it out. It should be part of the show. I digress. Michael,
You
you
can get
do
a 10-pound sledgehammer at Home Depot real cheap.
R.I.P. my desk. But yes, Michael, listen, I mean, I feel like now Adam and I are arguing.
Yeah.
for
Adam,
hours.
give me your best pitch, and Sarah, give me your best pitch. I'm totally malleable. I have no free will.
It's the
I can be bribed.
the never ending argument.
I've got an RV with your name on it, buddy.
Okay, so let's do this. So I'd like my fellow justice to clarify. Adam, why do you think it is not a Fifth Amendment violation? And Sarah, why do you think it is? I kind of have my ideas, but I want to be clear here.
I think that the government's actions are incredibly obnoxious and inconsiderate, bordering on causing actual property harm, and therefore opening them up to civil litigation, I think, but not a deprivation of the man's Fifth Amendment rights. They're not going out of their way to deprive him of life, liberty, and property. And they're also definitely not doing it with due process of law. Like, they are doing this with the full vested authority of the aviation authorities that allow them to set their flight paths. And that supersedes this man's individual property rights that I would say aren't even formally established. They're just, this general vague idea of, the guy owns the sky.
Okay, that feels gross, but I do see your points.
It does feel gross, right?
I feel
hold
gross
on
having
to that
said
feeling. Hold on to that feeling. I do think that this violated his Fifth Amendment rights, first and foremost, took away the liberty for him and his family to use their property as the way that they intended, which was to have their wonderful chicken business, whether it was eggs or poultry.
Was it without due process of law? Because I think that might be the sticking point.
I think I'm more hung up on the without just compensation, because the government doesn't even want to pay bro and his family. Like, you can't just use up all of the airspace right above somebody's house and destroy their business while doing so without giving them just compensation for the losses or the damages. Because at the end of the day, TC and his family, it doesn't seem like they can live their lives as they would like to, because the government has moved in next door and has decided to fly giant airplanes over their house in the middle of the night. So I think there is due process in the fact that there is an Air Commerce Act that gives, establishes airways for airplanes. I think that's great and that's important. But like, where's the compensation for TC? Not there. They're fighting it, and that's not cool.
I got a hot new King Solomon compromise, fresh off the press. TC owns everything from the outer boundary of hell to 60 feet above his garage. Military owns from 60 feet up to, let's say, 200 feet. And then TC gets from 200 feet to the moon. He can use all that space for hot air ballooning, flying kites, up to him. He just can't have that little slice.
But he's going to need an easement through the government's property to get to that 200 feet above the slice.
And then is he going to have to pay the government?
Yes, he has to compensate the government for his easement between 60 and 100 feet.
And his hot air balloon has scared the bejesus out of the military's chickens.
Yeah. Okay, so I think this is where I come down, and unfortunately I think Adam, in terms of the letter of the law, might be correct on this one.
I hate it.
But I'm going to say Fifth Amendment rights are not violated because the due process, I think, was done. But we should set up a system of compensation for these cases where some level of harm is met. Like that should be built into the due process in cases like this, where it's like, okay, like if something's gonna happen, like we're gonna fly a jet airplane like right over your bedroom. we can do that. Like the law says we can do that. But if it poses a risk to your physical or mental health, then there needs to be a system put in place to compensate you for that.
I feel like that's good foresight because God only knows what horrifyingly disruptive technologies Uncle Sam will invent in the future. Like,
Oh,
oh
God.
no, they're building a space catapult next to my houseboat because the
A
seas froze.
trebuchet.
Right, it's a trebuchet that launches cargo to the slave camp on the moon, and it's real noisy. Gets up to like 400 decibels.
Got a big SpaceX logo on it.
Yeah, it's got a big SpaceX logo on it, and you hear it go, pa-chong, like 8 times an hour.
I would sue.
I would sue.
If I lived next to that. Yeah, I'd want compensation to
It's
move.
like for the first couple times you hear it make that noise, it'd be kind of like, that's badass USA. But then you're like, oh man, what's that ringing? Why is blood coming out of my ears?
Oh God, I can't see anymore.
Yeah,
What's happening?
I'm literally been blinded by the shockwave from the gigantic magnetic cannon that shoots cargo to the moon. We're just setting precedent here for the terrifying future we're about to inhabit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unlike the people who did this common law back in the 1700s, we're thinking ahead.
Right? They could
Yeah.
not imagine what horrifying inventions the military would get up to.
The horrors were way beyond their comprehension.
They didn't even know the decibels went over 100 back then.
They didn't even know what a decibel was.
They didn't even have decibels. They just like the loudest sound anyone had ever heard was a whole bunch of people clapping in church.
I'm gonna be
Okay.
honest. I spaced out for a minute. Did we get?
That's fine.
Did we get a resolution?
Yeah, I think so. And by I think so, I mean I know we did. I'm just a little bit disappointed in
Forestalling
my
the inevitable.
So Sarah's dissenting.
Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
dissenting in favor of TC and his family, and his Fifth Amendment rights were violated. Property was taken. Liberty was taken. He has not been compensated, even though there was due process of establishing airways. He was still, for a lack of a better word, fucked over by the whole ordeal. So,
I'm going on the side of this not being the Fifth Amendment, but like I'm still really shaky on it because like the two parts of the Fifth Amendment were okay. There's the due process line, but then there's also the not shall take private property for public use without just compensation line, and I'm not sure which one overrides the other.
pick a side! Damn it! But no, it's good to think about these things.
You locking in? You locked it in?
I don't know, Michael, are you locked in?
All right, yeah, I guess I'm locked into it's not a violation of Fifth Amendment, but I hope I'm wrong when we hear about the history. How does that sound?
All right.
We'll take it.
And then where you deviate from Adam is you also think there's this additional thing that should happen around setting some standards for compensation.
Exactly. So yeah, I think due process was. I think a part of the due process in these cases should be a system for compensation.
This sort of thing will totally happen again. We should definitely nip that in the bud right now.
we should start an illegal lottery to pay out the victims.
Now you're thinking.
For all people that live within a half a mile radius around an airfield owned by the government.
TC's Memorial Chicken Fund.
When the planes flew over his house, did they have a warrant?
Probably not. No.
All right. So we have our opinions. We have Sarah saying, yes, that was a violation of TC's Fifth Amendment rights. We have Adam saying, no, it was not. And Mike is signing on to Adam's opinion and also writing his own opinion that has some additional things around what is probably just how eminent domain works.
Oh yeah, that's a thing. Oh my god, is this an eminent domain case?
I think we kind of invented eminent domain with the whole compensation thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my
I'm gonna be
God.
honest. The fact that I have a leg in the conservation world is where I'm drawing some of my ideas from.
Ah, I see. Well, I believe that Nikki has the actual results of the case, if you would like to hear that.
Yes, I do. So, first of all, this was argued May 1, 1946, and decided May 27, 1946. And so the US government started doing their flying things, it looks like June of 1942. And their lease, I guess, ended the end of the month, but there is a provision for renewals until 1967. This, and just for context, this was like during wartime, which was when the military was kind of interested in doing operations. So this was a 5-3-1 decision in favor of Causby. There was one
Ooh.
justice who did not take part in considering or deciding the case.
Wait, we can just
Wait,
sit these
you
out?
can- yeah, you
that
can
was an
opt
option.
out.
Yeah. Usually if there's some sort of like, I bet you, I don't know, there might have been, I didn't look too much into this, but if there was some sort of issue or conflict of it, like maybe the justice before becoming a justice was like a fighter pilot or something, like, and was just
Or
like,
a chicken
I can't be
farmer.
neutral. Yeah, right. And so,
Wow.
sat
Oh,
it out.
shit. I don't
Michael, you
believe
should
in
just
laws.
opted out.
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't know that was an option.
So
Well, now we
I
know.
don't think you can opt out just because you don't want to hear it. I think it's, if there's some sort of issue where you literally can't like
La
be
la la
impartial.
la 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 la. Can't hear you.
Chaos.
So,
Okay.
So yeah, in their reasoning, so there's this old saying in Latin, which I'm not even going to bother pronouncing, but Simino in his 2023 article basically translated it to "He who owns the soil owns everything above and below, from heaven to hell."
Love that.
So
That
there
goes
was
hard as fuck.
right. So there was, and it's known by a Latin word, which I don't even know, but like basically this is kind of like a known kind of doctrine. It comes from like, English and American common law. So that's kind of how things were. But then the court was like, well, we can't really apply this to the modern world. So we can't say all the way to heaven. However, there is precedent for a landowner to own or control space above the ground for occupation or for use, even if they're not physically occupying it. However, under the law, airspace is a public highway. Otherwise, every flight runs the risk of trespass suits. So, they're like, yeah. So all of a sudden, all these lawsuits, would, private claims to airspace, it would clog air traffic, it would interfere, with with airspace and everything like that. So they decided that airspace, where planes are flying around is public, but where it's like immediate reaches above the land, that's private. And then they were like, we're not going to bother trying to, precisely define immediate reaches. So they're just like, if it's like close enough to the land, and then that they just kind of left it.
Like within
At
a
that.
reasonable distance, I
Yeah.
would guess.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, this is it. We'll figure it out.
It's far enough away. It's fine.
So basically, whatever Congress designated as the minimum safe altitudes of flight, that is public airspace. And so that's, and when they were talking about it, I think it was like 500 feet during the day, 1,000 feet at night, or depends on the type of aircraft. However, the glide path, that's takeoffs and landings. So that's not, so because of that, the flights in question over these people's house, that's not within designated navigable airspace. So the airspace that the planes are using, it's so close to the land that the use of the land surface has been affected. So the landowner does have a claim to it. And so the damages are the product of sort of this direct invasion of their domain.
That makes complete sense. I feel like if we understood how air traffic flight worked better,
I mean,
Could
sure.
it
I
came to
mean,
that. Because you say that, it's like, yeah, I mean, that makes absolute total sense.
well, this is how they're making sense of some like, technical, like, cause I mean, maybe the one guy who sat it out was an aviation expert, but I don't know. The others weren't. Um, so this is kind of what they figured out. And so basically they're like, yeah, if the use or activity detracts from the owner's full enjoyment of the property and limits the use of the land, then that's an intrusion. And it doesn't matter that the planes didn't even touch the land. If the flights are so close that like they can't use the land, it's uninhabitable, then it's a taking that means it gets compensated under the Fifth Amendment.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love that.
So when when these rules came out, that me and Adam were like, well, technically there's due process. This whole thing about the glide paths hadn't actually been considered into that.
Yeah, no, this is like setting up like this was kind of new ground.
Okay, so this kind of is the due process happening.
So they're what? Yeah, we are the
Yeah.
due process.
Okay.
So basically, well, the whole question is this taking as defined by the Fifth Amendment? And if it is, then that means that they need to have compensation or whatever.
Gotcha. See,
Yeah.
I was thinking
yeah.
that the glide path, like this had been settled with the glide paths before this, and that's why I was thinking, oh well, due process must have happened. But now
It's
now that I
settled
got
in that like in terms of rules and like regulations governing. So like not in terms of the courts have already decided, but like Congress did a thing and then the aviation authorities were like, and then this is how the shit works.
Gotcha.
And then
And
the
this is-
courts.
and this is the first time I went to a court where they're like, well, hold on a second.
Yeah, exactly.
You made this rule, but this guy's chickens are flying into the wall and he's deaf now.
Yeah. So basically, so if a plane flying, over the land, like if it's in flight and it's over the land, however, very high, then totally cool. It's public. If the flights are so low and frequent, quote, as to be a direct and immediate interference with the enjoyment and use of the land, then that's a taking.
Absolutely. That's what I was thinking. I was like, these people literally are not living their best life on the property that they own because of these damn airplanes that keep going overhead.
Yeah. I mean, because it went from like small private planes to like, what did they say? Like
Exactly.
bombers and fighter planes and all sorts of things.
It's an escalation.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they lived there for 8 years with like hardly any issues, and then the military moves in, and it's like, hey guys, remember that Liberty that you had? Gone. Remember your eardrums? Gone.
I should have gone with my first instinct on this one. I thought about it too hard.
I don't think it was a liberty issue. It was purely property.
It feels Liberty to me, but I understand. I understand.
So
why not both? Isn't there a precedent for this?
I mean, sure, yeah. They were just very like kind of narrowed in on like, no, this is a problem for the guy. The lower court did establish that the glide path had decreased the value of the property because of the frequent low flights. And so the lower court was like, no, the U.S. has taken an easement. Remember, the U.S. challenged this, and that's how it ended up in front of the Supreme Court. However, in this case, the Supreme Court had an issue because I guess it wasn't clear in the record from those prior proceedings about whether the easement was temporary or permanent or the frequency of flights or the specific property taken. So SCOTUS couldn't like make a decision about whether the amount of the ward was proper. So basically what you need to do is measure the value like through the owner's loss, compare it with market value using, market value to guide recovery. So they reversed the judgment and remanded it back to the lower court, which was the Court of Claims, to make the necessary findings. And just to kind of fill that in a little bit, originally, the Court of Claims had awarded TC $2,000. Which would have come out to about $32,000 or $33,000 in 2024 dollars. But then this ruling came out. It went back down to the court. That court, the Court of Claims, reassessed the case and then awarded $1,435 in damages to the owners. So the equivalent of about $23,000 today.
Wait, that's it?
That's
That is
rough.
so low.
Yeah.
Oh my god. That's
Yeah.
like not even. Oh Jesus
It was
Christ.
probably based on like the value of the chickens.
That wasn't even worth all this court stuff.
That's horrifying. Poor TC. Poor chickens died in vain.
Yeah,
Wow.
I ended up going on YouTube because I was just like, how loud are jet engines? And I listened to a couple clips and I was like, okay. And then
Did
I
you turn your
found some like,
speakers up all the way? Like,
I
to really get the
absolutely did
effect?
not. I lasted 10 seconds and I'm like, well, that's annoying. And then turned it off. I was like, I got it. And then I did find a couple tables, which I cited in my argument from a couple of universities, where basically a jet engine is like the loudest thing. Like there's all the, there's conversation, there's like a suburban neighborhood, there's car, there's this. And then like at the top, it's like, and jet engine, if you're, however, at whatever distance. And a lot of those times the distances were like further away than the property was. But then the jet engine at like 82 feet was like sort of the top.
That's so mortifying. Like we've all heard like military airplanes flying overhead and been like, damn, those are so loud. And like you can't even really see them. You're like, what direction are they coming from? So imagine that 80 feet above your bedroom. No wonder the chickens died of shock.
less
Like,
less than 80 feet. It was 83 feet above the ground, right?
Oh,
and
it's
then
horrifying.
and then
Horrifying.
above the house, it was only 67 feet. So I mean, assuming it was just like a 2-story house or whatever. So if you're like upstairs, it's even
Wow.
closer. Like you're probably like, if you're outside, you could probably like make eye contact with the pilot
as your eardrums rupture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, I think the
So-
Supreme Court made the right choice. they did
Jerry-
the right thing on this one.
Did you have any so what that you wanted to add to this?
My only comment on this one is what I said to you earlier before the show started, which was I don't think the federal government had any business whatsoever appealing this.
Right, like what a stupid thing to they literally could have just been like, yeah, no, you're right, dude. We're sorry. We'll give you your $1,400.
That's what I said at
Go
the very
live
beginning. I'm like, wait, what's the price differential here? Why don't they just like, okay, here, like?
I mean, I guess if it was wartime, maybe they were like, oh my god, we cannot afford to spend a penny on this guy and his stupid chicken farm. Like, we're literally fighting Nazis. Nazis? This was the 40s, right? Yeah.
This is
So-
Cold War
After
at this
World War
point.
II. Yeah.
Oh, it was post World War II. Okay. They're like, we're getting ready to fight the Russians.
Peak of post-war paranoia, yeah.
Well, no, it was it was 1942 that this all was going down. But yeah, it got to SCOTUS in 46.
Oh, 42. I thought you
Okay,
said
okay,
46
okay.
earlier. Okay.
No, the case was argued and decided in 1946, but this had to do with shit
okay,
going
got
down
it,
in 42. So it took 4 years to like.
Either
4
way.
years of jets flying over this guy's head.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see why the government during the middle of World War II was like, no, we're going to fly our jets where we choose.
I mean, that's fair, but like were the budgets that tight that they couldn't cough up $1,400 to just shoo TC and his chickens away?
The original award was $2,000,
No,
and then
God forbid.
and then they took it up to the Supreme Court.
Wow.
I used to live across the street from an airport, like a little executive airport where like Gulf liners, or not Gulf liners, what are the little like executive jets would fly in and out?
G5s.
Yeah, like those kind of planes. And yeah, loud. Super loud and scary. So I
But
mean, so that's
Go
my
ahead,
so
Jared.
what. My so what is take the L, government, and acknowledge the fact that you've made the property unlivable. And there are lots of properties around airports that are like this. I used to live in one, and I don't know. It's if the Fifth Amendment means anything, rendering a property that was otherwise thriving useless sure seems to me like you took something.
But not all the justices saw it that way, because remember there was a dissent.
Yeah. What did the dissent say? I'm curious.
Well, so my read of it, which may or may not be accurate, but basically Justice Black was kind of, to me, it just seemed like he was complaining, like basically these Karens complained and turned a noise ordinance issue or a tort into like a constitutional case. So basically, Congress is supposed to control all navigable airspace, and Congress has done this, with the, and they've already decided that navigable airspace is subject to freedom of transit and therefore not subject to private ownership. So basically, Congress is doing the thing. We have all of this new technology. We can't mark air, quote, into separate compartments by imaginary metes and bounds in order to synchronize air ownership with land
Oh,
ownership.
there goes my idea.
So,
There it is.
and then they were like, it doesn't make sense to distinguish between cruising altitude and rules of safe altitudes during takeoff and landing, because you have to take off and land. So basically, they're saying that the court ended up putting up these constitutional barriers that limit how legislation and regulation could sort of evolve along with air transportation. And they're like, these barriers are not this. The Constitution doesn't have these barriers to like interfere with air travel. So so basically, you need to think about tort actions, and you can decide if this is a nuisance, a violation of statute, or is the result of negligent. But basically, there's technology happening, and there's new ways of living, and the court is just being a bunch of old fuddy-duddies that are just using the Constitution as a way to like cause problems. Was this guy's take. They're being overly broad, and and then he was comparing it with like a man who makes noise or shines light onto his neighbor's property, or noisy cars on a highway. That doesn't mean that they're taking possession of the houses, or if you get like an elevated train in a city that interferes with people's sleep, isn't taking possession of those people's properties. So Congress should figure out, how to remedy property owners, and where the courts should contribute is really only to awarding damages for injuries or like granting injunctions to prohibit planes from flying. So he was like, this isn't even a constitutional issue. Y'all are standing in the way of progress.
Wow. Lame take. Maybe
Yeah,
he
how
should
dare
live
you.
somewhere where military jet engines fly over his house in the middle of the night every night.
Well, he's not going to do that because he
No,
probably
he's
lived
not.
in the DC area, and there's like restrictions over how that
Right.
airspace is used.
My God, if these people were transported in time to the internet age, their heads would explode.
Oh, speaking of that, because actually, because Mike did raise a really good point. So, there had been some discussion as to whether and how much property owners own like the airspace above their property. There had been lawsuits for trespass against aircraft operators, and all sorts of disagreements among different courts. That's probably why SCOTUS took the case. However, this case left some unanswered questions like what's navigable airspace? How do you regulate it? Eventually, it did lead to legislation that created the Federal Aviation Agency, the FAA.
Oh, there we
And
go.
it also established this doctrine that noise from low-flying aircraft is a taking of property. So yeah, there were other
Nice.
lawsuits against government-owned airports. But some of the unanswered questions deal with like, navigable airspace, and then what do you do about things that are below navigable airspace, like drones specifically? The FAA says that it can regulate low altitude drones. The Government Accountability Office is like, but can you though? So that's kind of brewing if it's not being battled actively in the courts now. And there's also questions about air taxis and stuff as well. So,
Oh gosh.
yeah.
Are we at that point?
I mean, I read it and was like, what are you talking about? But
That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, oh my god, no.
You don't go to work by air taxi?
Air bike is my
Oh.
preferred.
But
method of
this was something that was brought up by Trevor Simoneau, in his 2023 paper that, he was writing about airship ownership in the US, or rather controversies regarding the same in the US.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there we have it.
So Sarah was right, I think, was the whole point.
Someone had to be right.
And I was trying to snag Adam. That's why I even snuck in that little Third Amendment biddy in there. But
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I will not be swayed.
Yeah, on the Prince, I'm glad I was at least had but there needs to be a system of compensation. I'm glad that at least came through.
You're not all evil, Michael. Not today.
Nope.
Not today.
I do.
I mean, I thought
appreciate-
everybody made sense.
I do appreciate that we've had some cases that have been pretty hard hitting. We've had people searched by the police in violent ways without warrants. We did a death penalty related case, and this case about a bunch of chickens scared by planes
Mhm.
and sleepless nights of the family caused so much angst. And I'm here for it. I love it.
Just wait till we hear dog v vacuum. That one incites a lot of passions.
Wow. I'm with the dog on that one, by the way.
Too loud. The vacuum's too loud.
Too loud. Shut it down. Pay the dog.
Pay the dog and throw the vacuum in jail.
Yeah.
We're getting all those toes.
Wow. Okay, well, this was a wild one, Justices.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels good to be right, though. I will say that.
I'm glad you were right.
Thank you.
I can't say the chickens got justice, but we tried to do right by them.
We tried.
Yeah,
We tried.
$2,000. Or
One day
well, I
they'll
guess
be able to get their pilot's
1,400.
licenses. For that lack of money is still insane to me.
Well,
that's all he
Yeah,
gets. I don't know.
$2,000 in current day is something like
I know.
30,000.
Yeah.
or
No,
so.
but when they
That still
when they
doesn't seem like a lot. though.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, you can't even. That's not even like a down payment on a new property. I mean, I guess it could be. It would have to be.
I actually have no idea. Yeah, so it was when the courts the case was sent back down, and then the Court of Claims had to reassess, and so then they reassessed and awarded. It was $1,435 in the end, which about 23,000.
I wonder how many chickens that comes out to.
I have no idea what the market value of a chicken is.
Wow. Well,
Excellent.
good job, Associate Justices. Thank you, Jarrett. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
And this is episode 9. It's a 10-episode season, so this is the penultimate episode. One left to go.
Woo.
Finally going to hear that chicken voting rights case.
Is the 10th one going to be a hard hitter, or is it going to be I can't even think of something witty.
Dog v vacuum.
Or cat versus spray bottle.
Yeah.
It's going to be a landmark case.
Yeah,
Cat v spray bottle. Gotta be.
Yep.
it'll be worth the price of admission, which is nothing.
I was going to
Yeah,
say,
right.
they don't get paid.
This is free labor.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you're just going to have to find out next time. But that will do it for us on this episode. Thank you to the Justices. Thank you to Nikki for all the prep that you do.
It was it's fun to read about all sorts of things that I don't know, all of this is just entirely new, and it's great. I'm here for it.
Well, thanks everybody. We'll catch you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a great week, everyone.
Take care. Well, there you have it. A 2-1 decision from our justices in favor of the government, arguing that TC's Fifth Amendment rights were not violated. This is in contrast to the real Supreme Court, which ruled 5-3 with 1 abstention in favor of TC because they felt the actions of the government lowered the value of the property and partly controlled its usage. That's it for this episode, but before we go, thanks again to my co-host and to our justices. The music in this episode was written by Studio Columna and Toby Smith and provided by Pixabay. Audio mixing and producing was done by me. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and comment so other people can find us. You can also catch us on YouTube, Instagram, and Blue Sky, Our handle is @ReLitigatedPodcast. Please help us spread the word. All right. Until next time, I'm Jarrett, and this has been Relitigated. Take care.